Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jerred Moon. The Garage Gym Athlete Podcast is a result of my desire to build better humans, unequivocal coaches, and autonomous athletes. I've spent the last several years obsessing over program design, nutrition, and every other way you can optimize human performance. This podcast distills the latest scientific research with what I've learned and blends it with the not-so-scientific field of mental toughness. We are here to build you into a dangerously effective athlete. If you enjoy this podcast, you can find out more about our training at garagegymathlete.com. And if you want to pursue more into the field of coaching and programming, head to endof3fitness.com. Thanks for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Ashley Hicks and Kyle Schrum.
What's up?
Good morning.
Ma'am, sir.
Oh, you did it right.
Yeah, that's how you do it. Joe is not here. He's, we don't actually know. And so we're not going to worry about it. But he's still part of the team. Don't worry, everyone. He's still here. He just takes a lot of vacations. Very stressful
All the vacations.
job. We have a very stressful job here. Yeah. I'm surprised we all make it through the week, to be honest. But we are going to get into some science today on perfectionism, which doesn't seem like a very scientific topic, but it is a little bit more mindset based. And I really think this one is quite awesome. And so we're going to dive into the science. We're also going to be talking about heat acclimation today, how we do it. We all live in pretty warm climates. It's actually unfortunate Joe's not here. He might live in the warmest climate right now, but has the least experience. So maybe it's good that he's not here. And then we'll get into the workout, which I'm sure one of you will have prepared by the time we get there. It's perfect. All right, Ashley's on it. All right, let's get into the science. So this was a study looking at perfectionism, and I just kind of want to talk about this study in more general terms this time, as opposed to getting into a lot of the weeds. I mean, if you guys want to, you absolutely can in your analysis of it, but this really isn't in the weeds type of study here. What they were looking at is two different types of perfectionism. I think it was at a 3-month mark and a year mark across a bunch of different athletes. They had a 50-50 male-female split. And by the time they got down to the year, I think there was 83 respondents at the 1-year follow-up, but there were more at the 3-month follow-up. But they were looking at two different types of perfectionism. And I think that's the biggest thing that we need to highlight and probably discuss today. So they looked at perfectionist striving, is what they call it. And it is characterized by setting very high standard and striving for perfection, whereas the perfectionist concerns, which is the second term to be familiar with in the study, which is characterized by the fear of mistakes, judgment from others, and not reaching one's expectations. And so automatically one has a good and a bad, right? And the study was done on younger athletes, which we can also discuss, but I will jump to the takeaway here because I think there's a lot more for the discussion. Ultimately, if you had higher levels of perfectionist concern, there were higher prediction for burnout, aspects of burnout, higher training distress, and lower perceived performance, which are both markers for overtraining. And then the perfectionist striving had the opposite relationship, predicting lower levels of burnout, lower aspects of burnout, and better perceived performance. So it was pretty clear winner in this case that perfectionist striving, which is just setting high standards and striving for that, versus perfectionist concerns, where you're worried about everyone else and making mistakes and all these others. That did not correlate with higher performance. Pretty interesting study. And then the last thing I'll mention before I throw it over to one of you is just that it was primarily done through survey. So it's at a pencil and paper survey. And when they do a survey, they typically rely on things that have been scientifically proven previously. So they don't just make up things. They're standards, like in psychological assessments, just like they have for nutritional assessments. And so they are deemed acceptable for scientific use to use these different surveys. And so that's how they do that. and let's dive into it a little bit more. There's not a ton to talk about, like I said, in the weeds of the study, but there's a lot that we can discuss otherwise. So what were your thoughts on this one?
I think that so we talked about that they were young. So they were in between 14 and 19 years old, if I'm correct in that. And it was both young ladies and young men. They did do individual sports, but then they talked about that they added the more team athletics. So, soccer and track and running and stuff. And so I think if we're talking about the positive versus the negative mindset, I feel like as a teenager, if you're trying to put yourself in their shoes, high school can be brutal. Yeah. It can be brutal with other peers. It can be brutal with, even in the sports realm, with coaches. I can remember back to my soccer days, and my coach, if you didn't play competitive soccer, so if you weren't on a select team and you played on a recreational team, you didn't start, no matter how good you were, all because you were not on a certain team. So you had to like meet this standard in order to even want to try out, I guess, in a high school setting of all things. I think this kind of shows that mindset makes all the difference, and we talk about this all the time. Whether you can look at something, and if it's negative in your view and you're fearful of it, obviously that's going to do lots of different things to your body. It's going to stress you out. I mean, versus if you can look at stuff even through failure and then try and find a positive out of it and say, I'm going to learn from this, I'm going to move on. I think that's a better way of thinking versus being so fearful and conserved. I said this can get tricky for me, the whole perfectionist term, even if the perfectionist striving, because I'm under the camp, and you guys might disagree with me, and I'm interested to see what you think, but the whole perfectionist mentality of like perfection, one's going to hit perfection, I don't think we'll ever get there. I think you're always like setting goals and trying to hit these goals, but you're never going to be perfect at what you're doing. I don't know. I think it's like the human nature in us. I think that we want to try to strive and get there, but I don't think you'll ever necessarily get it 100%. And I think that can lead to obsessive behavior sometimes, hence the negative, the concern. And if you don't, hit what you think you should hit, like a lift, or, hit a certain time, sometimes you beat yourself up. But again, that's what we're trying to avoid here. And then I said, I think this is why we talk about your best self and your whys. Like, why are you training? And I think it is a better internal motivator than necessarily striving for perfection. But again, interested to see what you guys think about that. Kyle, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The whole just reading the word perfection or perfectionist, it just kind of brings to mind the all or nothing mentality. I think that's just kind of built into that. And so if you're going to talk about perfection, like perfection is, I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory, but like to me, that's like all or nothing. And like that's the only way to go about it. And like we've talked about it so much on the podcast, like the all or nothing mentality is not something that you should be pursuing at all. But I liked that they kind of differentiated the two, where like the perfectionist striving is like setting high standards. Nothing wrong with setting high standards, and not just setting high standards, but like working to achieve those standards. But then, the issue comes when you get to what they call the perfectionist concerns, where it's like you're having anxiety over not being perfect. You know what I mean? Over not hitting exactly what you're trying to hit, or achieving those standards that you set, or what other people are going to think about your lack of perfection, things like that. Those are the things that kind of lead to burnout and things like that. So I kind of stay away from that word anyway. I agree with you completely, Ashley, that like perfect and perfection and things like that, like those are not things that we can really achieve, because we're not robots. You know what I mean? We're not machines. We're human beings. So there's always going to be so many factors that we don't have any control over that keep us from achieving those things. But I like, I think that everybody should be setting high standards, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having high expectations of yourself. But the problem is when that anxiety comes in, where you start letting that anxiety overcome you and drive your life, and like what you're talking about with the obsessive behaviors. And I especially think I like that they did this study with teenagers. Like, having been a youth minister for a long time, I worked with teenagers for a long time, and it's like the sports world for teenagers right now, especially in America, it's it's a dangerous place to be, in my opinion. I just think that, like, I think we've wound up putting a lot of pressure on kids and a lot of pressure on teenagers, and they kind of just feel natural pressure just because of their stage in life. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things that they're trying to figure out about themselves and about the world and how it works. And then we kind of throw these kind of things in on top of them, and they can kind of, get overwhelmed by those things. And I just think that's something we should be mindful of, but not just mindful of that for people in that age bracket, but also just mindful of that for ourselves. I think, like I said, setting those high goals is a good thing, and working to achieve those goals and working to achieve high standards for yourself is a good thing. But when you start getting to obsessive behavior, or you start getting into anxiety over not reaching those things, not achieving those things, that's where it can get dangerous.
Cool. So, I guess I have to disagree with both of you.
Great.
I agree, and I disagree. How I agree is that being perfect, or perfectionism as an ideal, is impossible, and it's not something that we should strive for. Just as an overall, like, life goal, being perfect. But I think perfection is possible when there's a standard. Because if you took an exam and you got 100%, you made the perfect score. There's no potential for better. That was perfect. Same with like a military PT test. I can score 100% on the test. And could I have ran faster, done more push-ups? Absolutely. But as far as the standard was concerned, I was perfect. And I don't think that that should always be your goal, but I do think perfection is possible given a standard. It's impossible given just life. Like, life will never be perfect. Most of the time you're trying to achieve anything, things will not be perfect. And those aren't things that you should get associated with. But I think if you have a standard for yourself, you can maintain perfection, or strive for it, not maintain at all times. So you can't be perfect. That's how I agree with you. But I think the ability to attain perfection is possible when there's a standard. And so it all depends on what the standard you set for yourself, because I have my own personal standards. I have personal standards for how I treat my kids, how I treat my wife, how I maintain fitness, all these things. And if I ever break those standards, I get very mad at myself. And so, like, in fitness, if my standard, and this is not my standard, just giving people an example, but if my standard was to train 3 times per week, and I can overshoot that, I hit the standard of 3 every week. I am perfect in my standard for 3 training sessions per week. And so that's what I think I gravitated towards when reading the study, is this perfectionism striving. Yeah, we're not going to get there, like, because there's just so many things to unpack, right? Like, in that training session, could I have tried harder? Could I have been better? Like, could I have lifted more? We're getting too in the weeds of perfection. And I 100% agree with you. At that point, it's all impossible. But if you set basically a moderate, low, high, whatever it is for you, a standard at a minimum, I think everyone should have a standard that they strive for. You can achieve perfection at times in those things. And so that's kind of how I view perfection. And the way I see this too, Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, she goes over in depth growth versus fixed mindset. And for anyone who hasn't read the book, I highly recommend it. It's the best parenting book I've ever read, that with grit, and neither one of them are parenting books. But I think that you absolutely should read both of them. So this growth mindset is, you're working, like, everything is like achievable through work, is kind of how I look at the growth mindset. It's like, I can't do that today, but I can put in the work and I will be able to do that thing. That's the growth mindset. The fixed mindset is, I can't do that. I'm not genetically gifted. I'm unable to do that. I'm not the type of person who can do that. And you don't really look at your being able to train yourself or get any better. And I feel like this plays really well into this perfectionist concerns and perfectionist striving that they cover in the study. As one person's looking at it as there's a standard, I can work towards it. It doesn't matter if I don't hit it. Like I'm going in this direction and we're growing, we're making progress. And then perfectionist concerned is more of, I can't do this. I'm making mistakes. I care what you think. You're a little bit more of a fixed mindset in that regard. And so I think that that's another thing that people should really dive into is how you're looking at your own self, because you mentioned the all or nothing mentality, which again, I don't think that you should have that mentality. But having a standard for yourself at a minimum, I think most people don't have that. And I think that you should have some sort of standard, but it has to be a realistic standard. And on top of that, you have to be very aware of who you are. Like, I'm really good at talking to myself, and I can beat myself up, but not get into these bad mental states from it, because I know my standard. I know I can get back to that standard, and I could be like, what the hell were you doing? Get back to it. And I can correct and get back to those things. So I am the type of person who can be really hard on myself if I don't meet my own standard and be mentally okay. But I know some people, they don't play well with that. They don't play well with any sort of negative feedback at all. And so they start down some really negative paths if they go down that. So I think if you're going to take any advice, people listening to this podcast, from the three of us, what we just said, it's going to start with knowing who the hell you are and what kind of feedback you can fit in your brain. Because if you set a standard for yourself and you're not holding it, and you are starting to get depressed or beating yourself up, that's a really bad mental state to be in. Change the standard, lower the standard, and then work on increasing the standard. Those are the things that you should have. But having a standard, I think, is really huge. So I love this study because it just showed that if you're striving for something as opposed to concerned with like how you're going to mess up or what everyone else thinks, you're going to have better outcomes overall. And I don't know, they talk about, they did the survey, and it seemed just like people had tendencies, right? It was like you either were kind of this one or that one. And I don't know where that comes from. I think that's the bigger thing that needs to come up. Like, is this a growth or fixed mindset thing that needs to happen at childhood? Because I mean, that may be my only parenting goal, is that all my children have a growth mindset when they leave me. Everything else, whatever, and yeah. So
Right.
I've been talking for a long time because I love all this mindset stuff. So sorry, but any thoughts on anything I mentioned?
I mean, I agree with you there. Like, I think that's the hard part of, like, with children, and even being a teacher or somebody who is some sort of leadership role with young adults, is fostering that, Jerred. I mean, I think a lot of it, trying to get them away from, like, it's not just about pleasing me or pleasing your peers or whatnot, like trying exactly what you said, like, I can grow from this, I can learn from this. And I think that's kind of hard, especially within the age group that they tested. And so yeah, just maybe thinking about, if you are a coach out there, or if you're a teacher out there, or have any sort of, I mean, even if you just deal with your own children, like how can you foster like a positive relationship to where they can think, like, how can I get better at this, I guess. But I guess I agree with you on your perfection statement. I do like the standard, and I agree with that. People that should have standards, and you're correct. If there is a standard and you hit 100% on a test, that's perfect there. But should we get into our killing comforts? Or Kyle,
Yeah.
did you have anything?
I think just the reason that I went the way that I did with this is like what they were looking at with sports and things. It's kind of hard to have like a set standard, like what you're talking about. Like there's so much of it is subjective, and so much of it really is dependent on your ability as an individual versus there being a standard. You know what I mean? Like if there's a standard, like if you're on a track and field team and like you're going to be on the first team, then there's a standard. You got to have to run this fast in order to be part of the first team, or something like that. And so there's a standard there, but like with all the different sports that they looked at and things like that, like those types of standards are kind of hard to come by and kind of hard to nail down. And so I was just kind of thinking of like a macro level of mindset in general. I guess I just kind of looked at it as exactly what you were talking about, that growth mindset or fixed mindset, whether I can get better at this or I wasn't able to achieve this. And so there's no point in me even trying, or I'm just not the kind of person that can do this. There are other people who can, but I can't, and I think just kind of that distinction was just kind of what I pulled out of the study.
Yeah, and that's where I agree, is because if you're playing on a football team in a game, the standard for perfection is winning.
Yep.
Like everything else, you could be the quarterback and throw 19 interceptions. If you still somehow come across with a win, you still met the standard, like for the ultimate, right? And so you can go down to that individual level. Like, say that's very unrealistic, but say you did throw, let's say, 3 or 4 interceptions as a quarterback, which is a pretty bad game, but you still managed to win. You maybe didn't meet your personal standard, but you met the standard of the team winning the game. And so there's always like different ways that you can look at these. Or if your team lost the game and you're an offensive lineman, but you didn't miss any blocks, like you hit your standard, even though the ultimate higher standard was lost. And this isn't to like do away with ownership, like, oh, I did my best, but the team sucked. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are just so many different standards you could have to try and reach perfection. And the reason I think that you should layer these mentally is because it never puts you in that negative mind state, right? Like William has been the quarterback on the last couple of football teams that he's been on, and it's just such a mind game. I'm like, man, I kind of wish you were playing a different position, because this is like, he's young, but there's still, you're talking about pressure. There's just like, he's the one, like every time, every throw, they like never run it. So it's 100% on him every time. It's just always him throwing it. And so
they sound like tech.
Yeah, he'll throw a good pass, a touchdown, interception, bad pass. Like, there's just all these things that can happen, and it's all on him, right? So I've just tried to work with him so many times of like the proper mindset for these things. And it's hard. It's really hard to set these standards for kids. And I think, ultimately, if anyone listening to this is like, oh, the study was between 14 to 19-year-olds, I actually really, really liked that. And the reason I really liked that is because they're more susceptible to what other people think, and like all these outside pressures. As an adult, you start to lose some of that stuff. You don't, which is a good thing. It's good that we lose like these outside expectations. Some adults don't, but a lot of adults do. You don't really care about these outside pressures as much. You're kind of playing your own game. And so I think that it was great, because it just really shows like how things can be perceived at this young age, and it's probably going to carry into your adulthood too. So, all right, how are we going to kill comfort with this study? How can the listener kill comfort?
My killing comfort takeaway is try something that you didn't quite hit or lift, or something that could have potentially been a negative in your training session, and try to shift that into a positive. I said, learn from your training, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you didn't hit the standard, why didn't you hit the standard? And let's focus on how we can hit it and achieve it the next time. Kyle.
Yeah, mine kind of relates to that. We talk about RPE on here, rated perceived exertion, things like that. And I just kind of, I really like that. I like that kind of aspect of training, of like, and something that, like, actually I mentioned, I got a new Polar watch, like something that the Polar watch does as well. With the sleep tracking and with your training load tracking, it'll track what you actually did in your training session, and at least as far as it can, like your load and your effort and those kinds of things. But it also asks you, like, on a 1 to 10 scale, how did you feel about, your training session? Was it easy? It's like 1 is easy and then 10 is the hardest. And so, like, a 1 to 10 scale, how hard was that training session on you? Like, how did you feel about it? And so I like being able to look at that as well, of not just looking at what is the programming specifically doing for me, and what did I physically do in this session, but like, how did I feel about the session? You know what I mean? And I feel like having both of those to look at is really important. Just kind of taking this holistic approach to your training. So it's not just about, am I putting in the work and getting in the reps and keeping the intensity in it? Because sometimes all of us run into those situations where, like in Fit Week, it's like, man, I didn't hit that number I wanted to hit. Well, why not? There's so many factors that could go into that. You know what I mean? And so I just feel like my killing comfort recommendation was kind of set up. If you don't have a way to track that already, set up some kind of RPE scale for yourself, either a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10 or whatever. Set up some kind of RPE scale for yourself and track that with your training sessions every single time you train, and say, how did I feel about this? Write it down, and then look back at it for the previous week, and just see, and keep tracking that over time. And then you can eventually compare that to your progress at the end of the cycle, or at the end of the 4 weeks, or like during a deload or something like that. You could say, well, I made this kind of progress, and overall, this is how I felt about my training during that time. So that factored in as well. So just kind of keeping track of not just the physical part of your training, but also the mental side of your training too.
So my killing comfort suggestion challenge will be set a damn standard for yourself. And this is
who saw that coming?
this is moving away from the perfectionism, though. Going back to the military physical fitness test, and I think standards in general just really resonate with me, probably because of military experience. There's a standard for everything. You either meet the standard or you don't meet the standard in almost every single part of your job, no matter your job too, because they have to have a way to rate you on it. And so, like going back to the PT test, yes, there's a perfect score on the PT test, but there are also minimum standards, right? Like these are like, you can't be in the military any longer if you do not meet the standard. And that's true across the board. And so I think having a minimum standard for yourself is something I'm encouraging you to hit, not a perfection standard. So you can set like what's the perfect version of this, and you can set what the minimum is. But what I am talking about is more standards in general. Like I have like a standard for my mile time, and if I ever go above that mile time, I better have lost a leg. Okay, like that's how I look at these things. I'll have a standard for the rest of my life on how fast I want to run a mile, and it's not super fast. It's not like a 5-minute mile or a 6-minute mile. It's just within that range. I want to be able to run till a certain age, a certain speed. And these are standards. I have these kind of ideas for almost everything in my life, certain standards. And if I ever break those standards, that's when I get hard on myself. But as long as I maintain my minimum standards or my perfection standards, I'm within my standard. So set a damn standard for yourself. I feel like, yeah, maybe never mind. My suggestion, my suggestions would lead to communism, I think.
Oh, but no.
I think every citizen should have like standards that we have to meet. And then if you don't meet those standards, we're not going to kill you, but we're going to put you in a program to get you to increase your standards. This is like
that's communism.
Yeah. But we would still very much embrace capitalism as an economy, but we would have personal standards that are really
socially
high.
See, this is why you have a team of us to balance you out.
Yeah. Well, maybe get a
unless
small
you throw
island.
Marco in there and then it's real.
Small island, only 100 people allowed.
Oh no.
We're going to have,
it can be a TV show.
Now it's getting into elitism, right? Like there's so many.
Oh no.
And that's not what I want either. I don't want anybody.
Just move on to the topic.
I just want people. I want people to have a standard, even if it's low. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Not a perfect standard, not a high standard, just a standard.
It's not a bad challenge. I think it's good.
All right.
You could come to Garage Sim Athlete and we set your standards for you.
See, that's the perfect example. We
Kyle,
have different levels of standards. And this is something I talk about all the time because there's a huge proponent in the fitness industry that everything should be individualized, right? Which is crazy expensive for the athlete. The only people who are preaching this are the people who charge a lot of money for them to be able to do it. And I think it's lazy because I'm like, well, if you use your brain a little bit more in your programming, you could figure out how to not have to fully individualize this, but make the programming good enough for people to follow to where it's individualized enough for them to see results. Anyway, we have a standard. People come, you meet our standard, not the other way around. And I think that's what differentiates us from almost anywhere else. It's like we have a standard. We test it during Fit Week. You don't have to test it if you're just here for general fitness. That's fine. But we have standards that give you an idea of how you're doing based off of other people in the program. And I think that goes a long way in just helping you press forward, right? You don't need to be at that competitor level. It's an almost unachievable standard for some people. But maintaining established, maintaining recruit. Those are very realistic goals and will keep you very well rounded for a very long time. All right, getting into the the topic, which is more studies for me. I did pull some studies for this one, but we're talking about heat acclimation and just giving some tips, tricks, and ideas on being acclimated to heat now that we're in the summer months and a lot of people live in hot areas. I think even some of our northern friends are getting pretty wicked summers this year and stuff. So we all live in hot and humid climates. And so we're going to give you some tips. Ashley.
Oh, okay. I was
what
like,
do you think?
I went first last time, so I was going to
She's
give
got
Tom the
Texas
floor.
experience. She's got Florida experience. Where
England
else?
experience.
Yeah. Is England hot? I don't know anything.
England can get hot. Yeah, I can.
Okay. Yeah.
Not like Texas and Florida hot, but North Carolina experience, which, yeah, there's that. Okay, so I think it takes a little bit to acclimate with anything, right? So once it starts to get hot, I would say the first couple of days it's gonna suck. I remember I always say text, but slacking you guys and saying, oh my gosh, the humidity is back. Like my zone 2, I was able to like exceed my zone 2 level faster because of the heat, right? Because it's like an extra intensity, it's like extra on top. So I think you need to give your body time to acclimate a little bit, and stay consistent with your training. But if you need to, I said maybe train in the morning when it's cooler. You can change to a different time of day when you train, to kind of give you a little bit of an advantage there, unless you're Jerred and you'll want to train at the very hottest part of the day.
Gotta time it. Where's the hottest? That's where the workout goes.
Yeah. Oh man. And then I said you can take it down a notch. I'm not saying sandbag your workouts. That is not what I'm saying here. I'm saying just be mindful of what your body is telling you. This is coming obviously from someone that is being mindful of where my heart rate is. And because again, intensity level for me, I can't get it so high. So I have to be mindful. And this is where my wearable comes into play a bit. Now, this is not the end all be all, but this is where I kind of gauge where I'm at, especially if I can feel it. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know. I'm not going to do those box jumps. I'm going to change it into step ups instead because, I can't go over. So just be mindful of where you're at and take it down a notch. And that is okay. If you have to do that. And then hydration. I know we're all probably going to talk on hydration a little bit, but I obviously like to add in some electrolytes, especially from the amount that I sweat. We all joke about it, but seriously, I Kyle's face. I add Noon in to my water, and I always said, pro tip, Emily Moon gave me the best tip ever. You just stick it in the fridge before you go out to work out. So when you're done, it's nice and cool. You take it and your internal core temperature is going down just from doing that. And I swear it makes me cool down faster. I also heard somewhere that you should drink cold water maybe beforehand for the internal temperature. Don't know if it's a real thing or not. I don't know if Jerred's going to bring a study.
I've tested that. No, this is completely anecdotal, but so I get in the sauna a lot, right? And I've noticed if I just get in the sauna, it's very uncomfortable after, I don't know, say 15 minutes. But if I bring in like ice water in like a thermal, like a Yeti type thing, that can stay cold.
Yeah.
I can stay in a lot longer with a lot less discomfort because it just has to be cooling your internal body temperature to where you don't feel as uncomfortable.
Right. So that would have been my another tip then is maybe drink cold water beforehand if you are still having to train in the afternoons, hardest part of the day, or even during training, what Jerred said, like if you just put some ice in your water, keep it cool, and take maybe a couple more sips than what you normally would during your training. And then know that you're probably not going to PR on some things. I mean, and that's okay. You're continue to train, but I mean, I think Jerred has even said like Murph PR times were not during the middle of the summer. Your run PR times are not going to be in the middle of the summer. It does not mean that the hard work you're putting in is wasted. So don't get down if you see things shift a bit. Kyle.
Trying to find which one of my points you
Sorry.
didn't take.
That's why I brought science to this one, because there's
Yeah,
not a
Jerred's
lot of
got-
ways you can go with.
Ashley doesn't have this studied. She can't steal this from me. So
Thank
yeah,
God.
I said hydrate. Obviously, you need to hydrate. Don't die out there. Switch up the time of day that you train. Make it earlier or make it later in the day, or something like that. Don't get discouraged by the slower times or lower maxes, which really goes well with the study that we just covered, just about the whole mentality of not being discouraged by those things. It kind of reinforces what we talk about here daily over decades. You're putting in the work, right? You're putting in the work. Like really the only bad thing you can do is stop doing the work. Like if you're still doing the work, you're making progress, you're going the right way, all those kinds of things. Focus on the EO3 elements, making sure that you're recovering properly, all those kinds of things. And I said also train indoors if possible. I train in
I did
my
one this
basement.
morning.
I don't have, I'm not a true garage gym athlete yet because I'm technically in the basement, and the basement is still air conditioned. So unless I'm doing like running or other things that I have to go outside for, most of my training is still indoors. So I say that not to say be lazy and train indoors, because some people might think that that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if the heat outside is actually preventing you from doing the work, that's what I just said, right? Is the only bad thing you can do is not do the work anymore. So like if the heat outside is preventing you from doing the work, find a way to do the work in a cooler environment. And that's kind of just part of it. Like I said, switching up the time of day or doing it indoors in the air conditioning, things like that. If that's going to keep you doing the work, then do it. So just be mindful of those kinds of things.
Yeah, it makes me think of that Tabata workout in the one-man system. You could just, just go nuts and find something different. Obviously try to stick with our programming, right?
Yep.
You want to, but at the same time, like what you said, I love that. Yep. Suggestion.
Alrighty.
Here comes
and
the science.
more studies. Here we go.
All right, so I'll go over just baseline stuff. Just first, know that your body will acclimate. Like if you're incredibly uncomfortable, just know that it will happen. And I didn't realize how acclimated I am to the heat until my brother started working out with me right here at the beginning of the summer. He would some days he's been like, all right, bro, I've hit my heat limit for the day. Like I just need to be done. Because it's wicked hot and he's not accustomed to it. And so, yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's been really bad lately too, because it's actually cooling off this week, but we've had high temperatures and high humidity, like both. So like 88% humidity with 96 degrees is feels like 121 degrees. Like
Welcome to Florida.
It's really bad. And I did live in Florida and did all my training outside. But what you need to look at with the heat is not this, it's not working against you. It's working for you. So Ashley mentioned I work out at one of the hottest parts of the day on purpose. And there are so many studies. So I have them. I'm going to talk about them in generalities here. I'm not going to dive into them. Maybe we can actually cover them on the podcast. But one from 2016, one from 2017, one from 2020, like all these ones that I pulled up. And a lot of them have to do with more aerobic conditioning, but all of them, big takeaway, there are increases in your VO2 max, 5K time trial, like all these different things are improved when you practice training in the heat versus they don't have a control group. Either the people would be their own control or there would just be a control group to where same training program, but the people who trained in the heat were up to 14% better. Like they're depending on the study that you're looking at, like significant increases in VO2 max and overall fitness because they trained in the heat. And a lot of these studies are done with sauna suits. And so if you want to Google some of this, like you're wearing a sauna suit, but the temperature is not that hot. Like it's like 95 degrees is kind of what it seems to be that you're looking for and what they would do. And then they would compare this to like when they did the people being the control, they'd have them work out in 95 degrees. Then they'd have them work out at 64 degrees, which would be like Globo Gym level cool, right?
They keep it that cold?
It's a refrigerator.
Yeah,
they're compensating for everybody being in there and moving around and stuff, didn't they?
Yeah,
keep the
global
air
gyms are
conditioning
kept
low.
very, very, very cool. Like, I don't even
Yeah.
know if my house can get down to 64 in the summer. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
And so, yeah, anyway, when they were their own control, significant increases in overall fitness at 95 degrees versus the 64 degrees. So there's an actual benefit to these things. But like Ashley said, summertime is not PR time. And I've said this on the podcast before. This is not when you're expecting Murph PRs, 5K PRs, and looking at Fit Week, all of those. If you're training outside, they're not good times to be like, oh, my 3-5K time got worse. Like, kind of irrelevant, guys. It's too hot to be able to do that. And so what happens though, and I notice it every year, and it's a very exciting time, is the fall. Like once things in Texas, that's like late December, and so that's when PRs just start coming out of the woodwork if you've been training during those hot periods. So
Right.
all of that fitness kind of gets built up. You're actually doing something. It's called hyperthermic conditioning, just to let people know what it's actually called, and you can go. But the other cool thing that I pulled in the research that I had not seen before, that if you exercise, just regular exercise. Let's say Kyle does whatever he's doing in his basement and it's 70 degrees in there, but he were to go get in a hot tub, like either just in his house, like at around 100 to 102 degrees, or a sauna for 15 to 20 minutes after, there were significant increases in VO2 max in doing that as well. And I've never seen that literature before until I started prepping for this podcast. Like, that is the most passive way to improve your fitness I've ever seen, by the way. Like, you're just like, all right, I'm done training, I'm going to go take a bath. And they have hot tubs in gyms, right? Like, that's a pretty common thing. Or I could get in the sauna immediately after, which I've done a lot, but I wasn't doing it because I thought it was going to improve my fitness, but I guess it does. So pretty cool stuff. And so my ultimate takeaway is embrace it. Don't run from it, and get the PRs later. And then I just want to, two safety things. One, electrolytes that Ashley mentioned, very important. So stay on top of your hydration and electrolytes, and then slippery surfaces. So this, I've seen someone like actually slip off of a pull-up bar. I've actually seen an unfortunate amount of times.
Yikes.
And this is a big reason we don't like kipping and I, whatever. But if you are doing something like toes to bar is probably the most dangerous one that we do program if you're doing them wrong. I always try to brief how to do it the correct way. But if you have really slippery hands and you're going basically upside down to do your toes to bar and you slip off,
you're on your back.
Yeah, you could have a very serious spinal injury. So be careful and maybe avoid things that are slippery, or make sure that they're dry. Your hands are dry. You have chalk, all these things. I've just seen some people get some pretty serious injuries from slipping off pull-up bars in the military, and just be mindful of the actual safety side of it.
If you are in high humidity areas, liquid chalk helps a little bit more than normal chalk.
I started using liquid chalk in Florida. Like, I'd never even heard of it before, and I started using it in Florida because the humidity in Florida is crazy. Like, you're just wet the second you start exercising. I actually liked it, but it's hard for like cleans. Like, I used to do heavy cleans and like almost impossible. My hands would rip right off the bar.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't go over a certain weight during the peak summer months here in Florida because I can't even hold on to it. So
you have to like mix grip for deadlift too. Like, it could be something light, but you can't. Yeah. It just comes right out.
Can't hold it.
So I'm adding a hot tub to my gym wish list now. Is that
or sauna?
Or you could just run a really hot bath. Like, I would love to be your excuse to get a legitimate hot tub, but you also, if you have a bathtub in your home.
I'm really clarifying for Hannah, because if she hears that you said I had to get a hot tub, then we're getting a hot tub. She's wanted one for a long time anyway. So it's like, I need to clarify what is actually being said here.
But you need to get in right after you train. So just make sure you got it all lined up.
And that's cool that it improves your VO2 max. Like, because normally people do it for like recovery is what I would think that they would do it for.
Yeah, no one's doing it for that reason. Like, people are doing it because they just want to get in a hot tub. And so it's cool that it has some actual science behind it. 102 degrees. It seems to be the
102.
You could just run your bathtub like really hot and like stick
I don't.
Temperature gauge in there, see how hot it is.
Isn't it? It's just different, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I can't go get in a bath. Well, one, my home has no bathtubs. If you guys want a little
That's true.
interesting,
I thought you were putting one in.
yeah, we'll have one soon enough. But as of right now, there are no bathtubs in this house. So it's not even a possibility. But if you have a bathtub, just go run it as hot as it can and get in.
Low mental toughness.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the workout.
Workout. It's walk the plank. So it's the Zercher walks with the barbell. You're going to do 10 rounds for max distance each round. And the competitor level is 50 to 60% of your body weight is what should be loaded on the bar. Obviously, scale down from there if you can't do that. You get 2 minutes rest between rounds. So after your max distance, you get 2 minutes rest. But the spicy part about that is the rest is in a plank position.
Yeah, this is a great one.
Yeah, it's good. It says, I love it. At the end, it says, good luck, stick with it. This should not be a quick workout.
It's kind of like 300.
Yeah.
If you know the quote, you know it. If you don't, that's fine. This will not be over quickly.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
It's a good quote. I said for my little tips for the workout is scale your weight accordingly. Like, don't go straight for the competitor level. Test it out before you give it a go. And then stay consistent with how, that's my challenge, I guess, is stay consistent with how far you go. So the first round should not be the furthest you go. Round 10, like everything that we do here should be sustainable and repeatable. So round 1 and round 10 should look fairly consistent. And those planks, stay up those 2 minutes. I know lots of you are going to try to get down on your knees real quick and come up. I mean, make it a point to where you're going to stay in that plank for 2 minutes if you can.
So my tips are get the weight right, keep your core tight. There you go.
There it is, and it rhymes.
There it
Right,
is.
Great
keep
job.
it tight.
There it is. And Ashley kind of sort of stole my challenge too.
Oh, sorry.
Which
you
is
didn't put it on there.
It's in there. Do each rest set unbroken. Because what was left out of the briefing is you are not resting for 2 minutes and planking for as much as you can of that 2 minutes.
Right.
You are accumulating 2 minutes in the plank. So if you come down out of your plank during your rest time, you have to stop the timer. So just keep that in mind. So that's my challenge, is to do each rest set unbroken. Stay in that plank unbroken the entire time. Don't come out of it for any reason, which is going to get challenging if you're keeping your core tight like you should during your Zercher walks. If you're not keeping your core tight during your Zercher walks, may not be as bad on you during the workout, but you're going to be hurting, really, really hurting afterwards, because you'll be using muscles you shouldn't have been using during those Zercher walks. Keep your core tight the whole time.
And get the weight right.
Get the weight right. Get the weight right. Keep your core tight.
There you go. We should always have a rhyming tip because it'll be memorized during the execution of the workout.
I'll take on that challenge from now on.
All right. Yeah, and Ashley has to do the music pairings, which are even more important after we uncovered the science of it. Was that last week?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was last week.
Okay.
This one,
we've had some reactions to that in the Facebook group this week.
Yeah.
yeah.
The science. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of our athletes took a picture of his TV where he was playing music on it, and fuel was on, and he just posted it and said science. And I was like,
nice.
Science. That's right.
Awesome. All right. So I got throttled when I originally created this workout. Joe is typically the throttle because he wants to have fun and keep things easy. And I just want to make things harder and harder. So I think the original version of this workout is also going to be my challenge. So it's just 10 sets for max distance, right? Like just as far as you can go. And you're supposed to push yourself. And that's what I don't like about the way this workout is written, is because, oh yeah, 10 meters was pushing myself, you know, come on. And so I wanted to set a standard as like, 4 400, 800 meters, 1600 meters. You set the standard for yourself. So I'm not going to set it for you, but I want everyone to set a standard. So you can break it up by 10 and stay repeatable, like Ashley was saying. So if you wanted to do a mile, you'd have to do 160 meters every single time, probably a little far, you know. You could do 80 meters every time, hit a half mile, something like that, but a standard. Maybe go down to 40 meters every time. I don't know. I don't know what the standard is for you, but that would be 400. That'd be a quarter mile, and definitely will kick up the intensity of this workout tenfold. If you have a standard that you're going for every time, it will be very, very challenging. So that's my challenge to you. If you are ready to take this on, set a standard in the distance you will achieve in your 10 rounds. And it doesn't have, you don't have to walk out like the Iron Mile. It can just be in your driveway or down the road or whatever it is. So that's my challenge. Tip: don't get lazy. Lazy in this workout will cause injury or a lot of discomfort. So Kyle mentioned keeping the core tight. So did Ashley, but also the back. Keep your back upright and try and pinch those shoulder blades together would be the cue I'd give you if we were doing this workout together or in person. Because if you start rounding your back forward with that Zercher and start getting lazy, even though you're keeping your core tight, your upper back is going to be in a lot of pain pretty fast. And so try and keep upright torso, tight core, and that's going to be a lot of muscle activation overall. Zercher is great for this reason in general. So I love programming them whenever we can, but it's a good one. So challenge is the distance. Tip is keep it all tight. How about I go with that? There you go. All right. Well, I guess we'll get out of here. I think we've covered it all pretty well. And we are in the new cycle. So if you are looking to join our training, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can sign up for a 14-day free trial, and we would really love to have you in the program if you are already one of our athletes. Thank you so much for being one of our athletes, and go set a damn standard for yourself, because if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you. Thanks for listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.